At 8:42 a.m. on February 9, 1945, Private Cleto Rodriguez crouched behind a pile of rubble in Manila, watching 300 Japanese Marines fortify the Paco Railroad Station 60 yards ahead. He was 21 years old, with just 6 weeks in combat and 0 medals to his name. The Japanese had turned the elegant railway station into a fortress. Machine gun nests surrounded the building. Riflemen occupied foxholes around each gun position. 20-millimeter cannons sat at every corner behind sandbag walls. Inside the main structure, a concrete pillbox housed a 37-millimeter gun and heavy mortars. Rodriguez belonged to Company B, 148th Infantry Regiment, 37th Infantry Division. His unit had been fighting through Manila for 6 days. The American advance had pushed the Japanese back district by district. Now the enemy had concentrated at Paco Station in Plaza de Lao. The station sat in what had been a thriving Japanese neighborhood before the war. The defenders knew every building, every alley, every firing position. Company B had tried to take the station twice already. Both assaults failed. The first attack cost 11 men. The second cost 14 more. Rodriguez had watched medics drag wounded soldiers back across open ground while Japanese machine guns tracked their movement. Most of the wounded died before reaching cover. The problem was simple. The station sat at the end of a 100-yard open field. No cover, no concealment, just flat ground and enemy guns. With clear fields of fire, every approach ended the same way. American soldiers would advance across the field. Japanese guns would open fire. The assault would collapse. Rodriguez carried a Browning automatic rifle. The bar weighed 19 lbs loaded. It fired 30 caliber rounds at 500 rounds per minute from a 20-round magazine. In a firefight, the weapon could empty its magazine in 2 1/2 seconds. Rodriguez had learned to fire in short bursts, 3 to 5 rounds, enough to suppress enemy positions without wasting ammunition. Next to him crouched Private First Class John Reese, 21 years old, Chickasaw Nation, enlisted December 1942 from Pryor, Oklahoma. Reese also carried a bar. The two men had been assigned to the same fire team 3 weeks earlier. They worked well together. Rodriguez was aggressive, Reese was steady. Both were excellent shots. Their platoon had been pinned down for 40 minutes. The platoon leader was deciding whether to request artillery support or pull back. Artillery would destroy the station, but it would also kill civilians still trapped inside surrounding buildings. Manila had a population of over 600,000. Thousands remained caught between American and Japanese lines. Rodriguez studied the station. The Japanese had positioned their heavy weapons to cover the main approaches, but there was a house 60 yards from the objective, single-story stone construction, still partially intact. If 2 men could reach that house, they could establish a firing position closer to the station, close enough to suppress the Japanese guns, close enough to force the defenders to redirect their fire, close enough to give the rest of the platoon a chance to advance. He looked at Reese. Reese nodded. Neither man asked permission. They simply moved. If you want to see whether Rodriguez and Reese survived their assault on the fortress, please hit that like button. It helps us share more World War II stories. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Rodriguez. The 2 men gathered extra ammunition. Rodriguez stuffed 4 additional bar magazines into his belt. Reese did the same. Each magazine held 20 rounds. Together, they carried over 300 rounds. They also grabbed fragmentation grenades, 6 each. Then they stood and ran toward the house. Japanese machine guns opened fire immediately. Bullets cracked past Rodriguez's head. Dirt erupted around his feet. He kept running. 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards. Reese was 3 steps behind him. Both men dove through the shattered doorway of the house and rolled to opposite walls. They were 60 yards from the station, alone, surrounded by 300 enemy Marines, and they had just announced their position to every Japanese gun crew in the sector. Rodriguez's hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. He pressed his back against the wall and forced himself to breathe slowly. Count to 3. Exhale. Count to 3. Inhale. The shaking stopped. The house had been a residence before the battle. Now it was just walls and rubble. Most of the roof had collapsed. Broken furniture littered the floor. A family had lived here, eaten meals here, raised children here. All gone now. Rodriguez moved to a window facing the station. The window frame was intact, but the glass had shattered weeks ago. He positioned himself to the left side of the opening. Never shoot from the center of a window. Japanese snipers would zero in on the center. Always shoot from the edge. Reese took position at a second window 8 feet away. Same principle. Edge of the frame, maximum cover, minimum exposure. The two men had learned these lessons the hard way during 6 weeks of urban combat in Manila. The Paco Railroad Station stood 60 yards away. Rodriguez could see Japanese soldiers moving between positions, machine gun crews, mortar teams, officers directing fire. The defenders had assumed the American assault would come from the main avenue. They had concentrated their forces accordingly. Nobody expected 2 riflemen to establish a position this close. Rodriguez raised his bar. He selected a machine gun position 40 yards away. 2 Japanese Marines were repositioning the gun to cover a different angle. They were focused on the weapon, not watching their flanks. Rodriguez centered his sight picture on the gunner's chest. He squeezed the trigger. 3-round burst. The gunner dropped. His loader spun toward the sound. Rodriguez fired again. 4 rounds. The loader fell across the machine gun. Reese opened fire at the same moment. His target was a 20mm cannon position 35 yards away. The gun crew had been loading a fresh magazine. Reese hit the loader first, then the gunner, then a third Japanese Marine who had been bringing up ammunition. All 3 went down in under 4 seconds. The Japanese response was immediate and overwhelming. Every gun position that could angle toward the house opened fire. Machine gun rounds tore through the walls. 20mm explosive shells detonated against the stone exterior. Dust and debris filled the air. Rodriguez dropped below the window frame, counted to 5, rose up, fired at a new target, dropped back down. This was the rhythm. Fire, drop, move, fire again. Never stay in the same position for more than 1 burst. Never give. The enemy, time to zero in. Keep moving. Keep shooting. Stay alive. Rodriguez spotted movement near the main entrance to the station. A group of Japanese replacements was running from a building behind the station. They were trying to reach the pillboxes at the front of the station. Fresh troops, fresh ammunition. If they reached those positions, the Japanese defense would strengthen significantly. He shouted to Reese, pointed at the running soldiers. Reese saw them. Both men opened fire simultaneously. The bar was designed for exactly this scenario. Suppressive fire against infantry in the open. Rodriguez emptied his magazine in controlled bursts. 5 Japanese soldiers fell. He dropped the empty magazine, slapped in a fresh one, kept firing. Reese was doing the same. The running soldiers scattered. Some tried to retreat. Some tried to continue forward. Most simply fell. When the shooting stopped, more than 40 Japanese Marines lay in the open ground between the rear building and the station. The pillboxes remained unmanned. No reinforcements would reach those positions, not while Rodriguez and Reese controlled this house. Rodriguez checked his ammunition. He had fired through 3 magazines in less than 10 minutes, 60 rounds. He had 5 magazines remaining, plus the grenades. Reese was in similar condition. They had plenty of ammunition, but plenty only lasted as long as... The Japanese gave them targets. the enemy changed tactics. Instead of trying to reinforce the front positions, they began concentrating fire on the house. Machine guns, mortars, the 20mm cannons. Every weapon that could angle toward Rodriguez and Reese was now directed at their position. The stone walls provided cover, but they would not hold forever. Already, Rodriguez could see daylight through holes in the walls where shells had punched through. He looked at his watch. 9:17 a.m. They had been in the house for 35 minutes. It felt like hours. His shoulders ached from the weight of the bar. His ears rang from the constant gunfire. His mouth tasted like concrete dust and gunpowder. Reese was reloading his bar when the first mortar round hit the roof. The explosion collapsed what remained of the ceiling. Wooden beams crashed down. Rodriguez threw himself against the wall. A beam missed his head by inches. When the dust cleared, half, the roof was gone. They were completely exposed from above, and the Japanese mortar crews had found their range. The second mortar round hit 30 seconds later, then a third. The Japanese had walked their fire directly onto the house. Rodriguez and Reese could not stay here. They had two options: retreat back to American lines across 100 yards of open ground, or advance 20 yards closer to the station where the mortar crews could not depress their weapons low enough to hit them. Rodriguez pointed toward the station. Reese understood immediately. Dead space. Every indirect fire weapon had a minimum range. Get close enough, and the mortars became useless. It was counterintuitive. Moving toward the enemy felt like suicide, but staying in the house was guaranteed death. They gathered their remaining ammunition. Rodriguez had 4 magazines left, 80 rounds. Reese had 5, 100 rounds, plus grenades. They would need every one. Rodriguez went first. He sprinted from the house toward a pile of rubble 20 yards closer to the station. Japanese rifles opened fire. Rounds snapped past his head. One bullet tore through his sleeve without touching skin. He dove behind the rubble. Reese was up and running before Rodriguez had fully taken cover. The two men moved in bounds, one running, one shooting, never both exposed at the same time. They reached the position 20 yards from the station. The angle was different here. Rodriguez could see into the ground floor windows. Japanese soldiers were repositioning inside, moving weapons, redirecting fire. They had not expected anyone to get this close. A heavy machine gun crew was setting up in a window 15 yards away. Rodriguez could see the barrel protruding from the frame. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt, yanked the pin, counted 1, 2, threw hard. The grenade sailed through the window. 3. Seconds later, it detonated. The machine gun fell silent. Reese spotted a 20mm cannon position at the corner of the building. The gun was unmanned. The crew had been killed earlier, but Japanese soldiers were dragging a replacement crew toward the position. If that cannon came back online, it would shred their cover in seconds. Reese fired a long burst from his bar. 10 rounds. The first 2 soldiers fell, the others scattered. One tried to reach the cannon anyway. Reese fired again. The soldier dropped 2 feet from the gun. The cannon remained silent. Rodriguez was throwing grenades methodically now. He had studied the station's layout during the 40 minutes his platoon had been pinned down. He knew where the strong points were: ground floor windows, the main entrance, the pillbox positions. Each grenade was aimed at a specific target, thrown hard, thrown accurately. He was not trying to kill every Japanese soldier in the building. He was trying to disorganize their defense, force them to abandon positions, make them react instead of act. It was working. Rodriguez could see movement inside the station becoming chaotic. Japanese soldiers were pulling back from windows, abandoning forward positions. Some were trying to reorganize, others were simply trying to survive. The defensive line was collapsing, but Rodriguez and Reese were running out of ammunition. Rodriguez fired his last full magazine at a machine gun position. 20 rounds. The gun went quiet. He dropped the empty magazine and loaded his final one. 20 rounds left. That was all. Reese was in the same situation. He had one magazine remaining. They had been shooting for over an hour. The constant firing, the grenade throws, the movement under fire. Both men were exhausted. Rodriguez's hands were raw from gripping the bar. His shoulder was bruised from the weapon's recoil. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. But they had achieved something remarkable. The Japanese defense had been concentrated and organized when Rodriguez and Reese first attacked. Now it was scattered and confused. Machine gun positions were unmanned. The 20 Milito cannons were silent. The pillboxes sat empty. Over 80 Japanese Marines lay dead around the station, and the 2 Americans were still shooting. Rodriguez looked back toward American lines. His platoon was still pinned down 100 yards. Away. Too far to help, too far to provide covering fire. Rodriguez and Reese were on their own. They had always been on their own. From the moment they ran toward that first house, they had been fighting this battle with no support, no backup, no reinforcements. Rodriguez checked his ammunition one more time. 20 rounds, 6 grenades used, 0 grenades remaining. He looked at Reese. Reese held up one magazine, his last. They had maybe 3 minutes of ammunition left. Maybe less, if the Japanese counterattacked. And then they would have to withdraw, run back across that 100-yard killing field with empty weapons, while 300 angry Japanese Marines shot at their backs. Rodriguez made the decision. They would withdraw, not because they were afraid, not because they had failed, but because staying here with no ammunition was pointless suicide. They had done their job, disrupted the Japanese defense, killed over 80 enemy soldiers, given their platoon a chance to advance. Now they needed to survive long enough to see whether that chance mattered. The withdrawal plan was simple. One man would fire while the other ran, then switch. Leapfrog back toward American lines, cover each other, keep the Japanese pinned down, make it back alive. Reese would go first. He was 3 years younger than Rodriguez, but he was the steadier of the two, more methodical, better, at controlling his breathing under stress. Rodriguez trusted him completely. Rodriguez opened fire on the station. Short, controlled bursts. He was not trying to hit specific targets anymore, just suppressive fire, keeping Japanese heads down, buying Reese time to move. Reese sprinted back toward the house they had occupied earlier. 20 yards. He made it, took cover, raised his bar, shouted that he was ready. Rodriguez stood and ran. His legs felt like lead. The adrenaline that had carried him through the past hour was draining away. Every step required conscious effort. Lift foot, push forward, land, repeat. Japanese rifles opened fire. Bullets kicked up dirt around his boots. One round passed so close to his face, he felt the pressure wave. He reached Reese's position, dropped behind cover, gasped for air. Reese was up and running before Rodriguez had caught his breath. Back toward the next piece of cover, back toward the rubble pile, back toward safety. Rodriguez forced himself to his feet, raised the bar, fired at the station. His magazine was almost empty, maybe 8 rounds left. He fired in 2-round bursts. Make every shot count. Reese reached the rubble pile, took position. Rodriguez ran. They were 40 yards from American lines now, 60 yards from the station. The Japanese were pouring fire at them. Machine guns, rifles, even the mortar crews were trying to hit them despite the difficult angle. Explosions bracketed their position. Shrapnel whistled overhead. Rodriguez reached the rubble pile. Reese was already moving to the next position, back to that first house, the one with the collapsed roof and the shattered windows. Reese was 15 yards away when Rodriguez saw the Japanese reinforcements. A fresh squad of Marines was advancing from the left side of the station. 8 men. They had worked their way around the American position while Rodriguez and Reese were focused on withdrawing. Now they were flanking, trying to cut off the retreat, trying to surround the 2 Americans before they could escape. Rodriguez swung his bar toward the threat, pulled the trigger. Nothing. Empty magazine. He dropped it, reached for his belt. His last magazine was gone. He had fired it during the previous bound. He was out of ammunition, completely dry. Reese saw the Japanese squad at the same moment Rodriguez did. He was closer to them, maybe 20 yards. He pivoted, brought his bar up, fired a burst. 3 Japanese soldiers went down. The others scattered, took cover, returned fire. Rodriguez watched helplessly as Reese engaged the squad alone. Reese fired again. Another Japanese soldier fell. The bar bolt locked back. Empty magazine. Reese dropped to one knee behind a low wall, reached for a fresh magazine, his last magazine. He pulled it from his belt, brought it toward. The weapon, a Japanese rifle, cracked once. The single shot was lost in the chaos of the firefight, but Rodriguez saw Reese jerk, saw him drop the magazine, saw him fall sideways against the wall. Rodriguez was running before he made the conscious decision to move. He sprinted toward Reese. No weapon, no ammunition, no plan, just the overwhelming need to reach his partner. Bullets snapped past him. One tore through his pack. Another hit the ground at his feet. He kept running. He reached Reese 15 seconds later. Reese was still alive, but barely. The bullet had hit him in the chest, high right side. Blood was spreading across his uniform. His eyes were open but unfocused. He was trying to speak, but no sound came out. His hands were still reaching for the magazine he had dropped. Still trying to reload. Still trying to fight.